Hello class, in this video I'm going to do exercises 4.34 and 4.36 in the textbook. What those exercises ask you to do is take a formula that they've given you and put it into as simple a form as possible. You're only going to need to appeal to three principles in order to do this. Associativity, commutativity, and idempotence. Appeal to those three principles in order to simplify the proof. The form you should give your answer in is a chain of equivalences, a chain of equivalence proof, such that every step in every line of the proof is equivalent to the original one. And every step also must be justified by the principle that you're using. You can do multiple applications of one principle in a single step, that's fine, but we want you to separate out every individual step and every individual principle you use. So no compressing steps together if they're using different principles. The book says check out the proof on page 120 in order to get an idea of what they're looking for. So let's go look and see what they say. What they mean is this thing down here. This is the chain of equivalences. So we have an original formula on the left-hand side here, and every line over here to the right is equivalent to the original one. And every one of these is a transformation of the step before it using some principle of equivalence. Two differences in the example that they give you versus what we're asking of you. Here, De Morgan's and double negation are also being appealed to besides just associativity, commutativity, and idempotence. And secondly, they're not giving you the justifications out here on the right, which you need to do. Of course, they give you this nice little paragraph explanation down here, and you should be able to use this to follow the justifications of all the steps in here. But in your answers, we do want you to include the justifications of every step that you give. Okay, the three principles that we said you're going to use are associativity, commutativity, and idempotence. They're just right up here in the textbook, so associativity starts on page 119. What that says is, let's say you have some sentence like P and Q and R. Well, the Q and the R are grouped here, and that's just the same as grouping the P and Q part. So you can say P and Q and R. Or you could just drop the grouping altogether and have some big conjunction like P and Q and R. And of course, whatever holds for conjunction also holds for disjunction. Those are duals, so it doesn't matter which connective you're using. Notice though that it's important that these connectives are not mixed. You can regroup conjuncts. You can't regroup conjuncts and disjuncts together. That does not hold. So you have to be careful about when you have a complex formula with a mixture of different connectives in it, make sure you're not regrouping different conjuncts and disjuncts. That would not be valid. Okay, what does commutativity say? Commutativity says, let's say we have P and Q. Well, that's just the same as having Q and P. Order does not matter. Or let's say we have some complex thing like P and Q and R. Well, we can just move the R to the front. So if you have something grouped like this, you're allowed to move around any of those formulas that you wish. That's commutativity. Lastly, idempotence says if we have P and P, well, that's redundant. That's just the same thing as P. Or P is the same thing as P. So we can drop any kind of redundancies. But we do require that you drop them next to each other. So you have to first get P and P next to each other in order to drop one of them. The book does say, of course, if you have P and Q and P, you can drop that P from each side of it to get P and Q. But technically speaking, that's also using commutativity. Given that we're asking you to separate out into distinct steps every different principle that you're appealing to, you're not allowed to do idempotence and commutativity at the same time. So we do not want you to take this kind of shortcut, please. Okay, now let's go back to the examples. Here we are, 4.34. So B and A and B and C. Well, if you think about it, this is just one giant conjunction. We don't have a mixture of symbols. So really this is the same as B and A and B and C. We can just drop these inner parentheses. Of course, these outer parentheses are also unnecessary, so we could drop them too. So what is the rule that allows us to drop parentheses? Well, you're going to have to remember these terms, associativity and commutativity and idempotence. So here's a little helpful mnemonic. Associativity is a principle about who associates with what. So it's about who's in what groups. So think of your associates. Those are the people in your group. So if we're changing the grouping, we're doing associativity. Commutativity, by contrast, the root word here is commute. Like when you commute to campus, you travel from one place to another. So moving formulas around inside this complex formula is commuting, and grouping them in different ways is associating. So associativity for grouping, commutativity for moving. Idempotence, I have no mnemonic for this. That's just the bizarre word that nobody really knows except logicians for dropping redundancies. Okay. So in order to do this written exercise, of course, you're going to have to open a Word file. I started these for you here. So here's 3.34. Our original sentence was this. And what I did was I made a little chain of equivalences. I guess I could make this just sort of nice and neat and repeat the equivalence symbol like the book does for you. But that's not really necessary. So it's going to look something like this. Here's my original sentence. My first transformation is to drop all the grouping. That's my associativity. Then I reordered the B's into the front. That's commutativity. Finally, well, I didn't do this properly. I dropped that redundancy in the B. That's idempotence. So here's my final answer. So that's what a complete answer for 4.34 would look like. Let's do 4.36 in order to finish this work off. And so here's my original sentence. I'm just going to copy and paste it over here. Now this is all disjunctions. Did I copy that right? That seems too easy. It is all just disjunctions. Okay, this is easy. So the first thing we can do is just drop all of these parentheses. That's multiple applications of associativity, but that's okay. We're still only applying one rule, so there's nothing wrong with that. Now that we've done that, we have these B's are already next to each other too. Hey, this is really going to be easy. There's no commutativity necessary. We can just drop the two things that are next to each other. So the next line of my proof is just going to look something like this, where I am going to drop my redundant B's and get something like that. Now that's as simplified as we can possibly get here. So I'm going to just cite idempotence for that transformation, and we are already done. There's no further simplifications possible. So you're going to end up with a chain of equivalences like these examples for your answer, giving the justifications over here. It's also legitimate, let me say this, you could just number these if you want in a certain way. So there's another formulation of these that's a perfectly legitimate way to present your answer. Let me just give you that quickly. So we might just number the original sentence like that, and then every one of these next lines is going to be another individually numbered sentence. So putting it into Word would look like something like this. I could just put out here if I want, this is the original, or this is the given sentence. So this is another legitimate way to put your answer, where each of the sentences, the step below it, is a transformation of the step above it, and we're citing which rule our transformation was given in. It's also quite helpful to use the logical symbols from the textbook rather than using other symbols. So I gave you in a Word file a bunch of the logical symbols that we'll be using in this class. You can just copy and paste those in order to make your written exercise files nice and easy to read. But it's also helpful to save these as PDFs, because no matter what symbols you're using, sometimes the fonts can be different on different computers, different versions of programs. So if you save things as PDFs, you don't have to worry about what kind of fonts we're going to have when we open our files, when we open your files to grade it. So PDFs are definitely the best way to save everything. Okay, so there's the answers for 4.34 and 4.36. Thanks.